Okay, so well, I don't know. This is our last week. And so I'm going to do question one here. What organizational knowledge is needed to best understand and communicate with the various organizational publics? So first, we want to know who are the stakeholders. There are external stakeholders, which are like customers, suppliers, contractors, people who control resources that the organization needs, like shareholders, investors, lenders, etc. And then also general public and policy related agencies. And then internal stakeholders, which would be like employees, leadership, management, and so on. So once you have identified who they are, then you want to learn more information about the stakeholders, their demographics, their psychographics, who's shaping their opinions, what's their stake in the organization, how dependent is the organization on these identified publics, and what is the public's opinion of the organization and the issues that the organization is discussing. So if you look at the co-orientation model, which is in figure 14.2 of the textbook, it shows how the informational interaction between the organization and the stakeholders takes place. So on the one side of the figure, you have the organization, and on the other side is the stakeholder group. The chart is like a visual representation of the concept that William James, who was an American pragmatist philosopher, is credited as saying where whenever two people meet, it's really six people who are there. So there's who you think you are, who the other person thinks you are, and who you actually are. So that's kind of the idea in the flow chart of of the organization and of the stakeholders, and how that whole information is getting passed around. So the chart then answers the questions: what's the level of agreement between the stakeholders and the organization? So what's the level of understanding, what's the level of congruency, and what's the level of accuracy? So kind of like, is my perception of myself, how much of that is similar to your perception of me? How much of that is similar to the reality of me? And use, instead of me, the organization, and the other person is, the stakeholders. So I don't have a lot of experience with, with this kind of thing in my professional life. The only thing I can think of is on sort of a, pretty minuscule scale where once a year my team member and I coordinate a small public awareness campaign around World Breastfeeding Week. And we do various things, such as we've had a community march, a community latch on, where breastfeeding women gather at the same time as others around the nation and the world to promote breastfeeding. We've done a drive-through giveaway, holding up signs to the public, in a busy place, and giving away, stuff to moms who breastfeed, stickers and whatever, just stuff. And so this is done on such, a small scale that I can't really gauge, our success through our own, basically it's our own interpretation of the level that we feel, of interest that we've experienced with whatever particular thing we chose to do. Some things have been more successful than others, and we evaluate that based on basically participation. So that's kind of the only thing I could think of that was sort of similar. Question 2, the key similarities and differences between public relations and advertising and marketing. So the book explains the differences in section 2.0 of this chapter. So they're similar in that, they're both looking for who's the audience, finding the demographics, the geographical location, the age, the gender, nationality, economic status, etc., and the psychographics. So what are they thinking about? What do they think about politics, about religion? What are their lifestyle preferences? So both of those will be looking at those things. They ask the audience questions about recall, about knowledge, about interest, intent, and preference, both with advertising and marketing, and with public relations. With advertising and marketing, those questions are going to be centered around a particular product or service, whereas with the public relations, it's around issues, risks, and crises. So the difference then is mostly around the use of controlled media, which is the media that the organization has paid to control the content. They paid to control where it's placed and how often the message goes out to the public. So that is the major difference. Then question 3 wants us to discuss differences between legitimate news and propaganda. That's a tough one. It's a big issue, of course. So the chapter in the book, agenda setting theory is discussed and explained as a method of mass communication that dictates what people think about more than just what they think. It's more like what they're thinking about. So that's part of it. This is the idea that the topics that are constantly being discussed in the media are the topics that people, for the most part, are thinking about because they're constantly being bombarded with the subject. So, just thinking of the top news stories in the last year, in the last month, whatever. If the popular and most used media distributors were not pumping out those constant spotlights and updates and highlights, we probably wouldn't all be so obsessed with, these different issues. So how do they work? Often they work by using cognitive dissonance, which is when there's a problem that's raised and it doesn't sit well with you. That you have an uneasiness and you are looking for a solution to that. Or there's attribution theory, which will attribute a cause to something that's associated with it, but not necessarily proven that that's the cause. So it's like if you've heard of association does not equal causation. So just because two things are associated doesn't mean one causes the other, but yet we tend to think that. Like if I say, something that is, this happens a lot with scientific studies. Like they looked at 100 people and who lived, in a golf course neighborhood, and all of those people happen to have osteoporosis or something. I don't know. That's just random. But so the cause of osteoporosis they're associated, but that might not be the cause, but often it's implied that it is. Most likely it's because a lot of people who live in a golf course neighborhood are older, and older people tend to, you see where this is going. Anyway, so with media, as you participate in media, I skipped ahead. So then there's priming theory. So that explains the way we lump things together in categories or chains. Like one thought leads to another, so on. So with media, as you participate in media, you receive kind of these priming messages that lead you to continue to want to seek out more media along those same lines to kind of answer those questions, or your appetite has been whet, sort of thing. So why do they work? They work because I couldn't find this material, but I just kind of drew some conclusions because we're social creatures and we naturally want to be accepted by our community. The book did talk about that, that, no minority group wants to kind of voice the reasons why they're the out group or whatever. So we don't tend to want to bring attention to ourselves when we're in the minority. So then also add on top of that ease of access to a wide selection of media sources. We can pick and choose. We can create our own community. We can find our own community. And then we also will find the media content that, is speaking what that community wants to hear. And then we just kind of continue to follow those lines of thinking. And so that's what I have. Thanks.